I think there are many things that happened in that fight that Anthony Joshua will be looking at and saying, gosh, I could have done that so much better. But that's not taking anything away from Andy Ruiz, because he improved his chances by letting his hands go when he was hurt in the third round. Look, I think Joshua will. I think he will come back. I think he has a very professional team, a very good coach. He has a good team around him. I know he would love nothing more than a redo for some of the choices that he made in that fight. When he had Andy down in the third round with the right uppercut, left hook, he ran in recklessly, with no respect at all for Andy Ruiz's power. And he was, whether he was looking at the Dimitrenko fight thinking, well, Andy couldn't put Dimitrenko down, how's he ever going to hurt me? We know that Andy is very powerful. He's very fast. He's a very skillful fighter. Joseph Parker tells the story. It was the hardest he's ever been hit in his professional boxing career was by Andy Ruiz. It's a heck of a lesson for Anthony Joshua to learn. Well, Joe, it's funny. Joe's part of an unusual triangle. He was the first guy to go 12 rounds with Anthony Joshua in a fight where Joe was actually cancelled out because of the poor performance of the referee, not allowing him to fight in close in that fight. And of course, Andy has this fantastic win over Joshua, putting him on the floor 4 times. And Joe, back in December of 2016, when both fighters were undefeated, gave Andy his only loss to date, winning the WBO heavyweight world title from Andy Ruiz. So, Joe's proud to be part of that triangle. And we know we've got Joshua and Andy fighting the rematch later on this year. No one really knows how that fight's going to unravel. But I tell you what, I think there's a very, very strong likelihood at some stage in the future, especially with Joe only being 27 years old, that he will get in the ring with both those guys. I think that Joseph Parker and Andy Ruiz are going to be a good fight every time they fight. Gosh, I tell you what, I think he's going to have to not only make a physical adjustment, but a major mental adjustment. There were a lot of things that just weren't quite right in that fight, from his body language to the way he fought. I think to the way he trained. And let's remember, I don't know how he trained, but I know that when I sat there with my son Taylor and Joseph Parker at the weigh-in, and I looked at him and he weighed the same as he weighed when he fought Joe, but I said to Joe, his body looks totally different. He was nowhere near as defined. So I don't know what that means, if there were different types of training that he did, but as I mentioned before, he has a very professional team. They'll be evaluating everything and they'll be making the necessary changes to hopefully get a better result in the rematch. But let's remember, Andy Ruiz will also be a better fighter in the rematch, which is going to make things very difficult for Anthony Joshua. Andy deserves all the praise and accolades that he's getting at the moment, and why should he not be paraded around and celebrated? He just beat the so-called baddest man on the planet. He was a massive underdog. I stood up at a press conference on the Friday, the day before the fight in New York, where Eddie Hearn asked me to speak about both guys. And I talked about the strengths of Andy Ruiz. And I also talked how I thought the odds makers were completely balmy. They had missed it entirely, having Andy a 40-1 underdog. Andy Ruiz, and I'm not saying this because he has now put Joshua on his back. This is before the Joshua fight I was saying this. He should be in everybody's top 10. He's a very skillful guy. He's got very fast hands for a heavyweight. He throws terrific combinations, and he's not afraid. And his whole career, he's fought much taller. He's given away height and reach in nearly every single fight. It was a shock to the world, but not quite as big of a shock to our team because we've studied Andy and we've known him for a long time.